In the grand halls of the Sterling mansion, love was never part of the contract. Lily Harper, a graceful woman with emerald eyes and a quiet soul, married millionaire Kaden Sterling to save her family, but found herself trapped in a loveless, silent arrangement. For 3 long years, they lived like strangers under one roof. But when a single unexpected kiss shatters the walls between them, everything changes. Welcome to a story of passion buried beneath duty, of icy silence melting into fire. What happens when a wife, tired of being invisible, dares to speak, and her cold husband finally sees her? What begins as a business deal becomes a storm of longing, heartbreak, and rediscovery. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. We'd love to know. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment of love, drama, and redemption. Stay with us till the end, because some flames are worth waiting for. The Sterling mansion loomed like a monument to opulence and distance, its marble floors echoing with the silence that had become Lily Harper's daily companion. With every step, her heels whispered across the grand hall, as if careful not to disturb the ghosts of what could have been. For 3 years, she had lived here, not as a wife, not even as a partner, but as a silent fixture, like the antique vases or the oil paintings hanging stiffly on the walls. Her raven black hair, always neatly pinned, framed a face too poised for her age. Her emerald eyes, once full of light, now carried the dull sheen of quiet endurance. She hadn't wanted this life, not really. But when her father's debts threatened to drown her family, she'd done what she believed was right. She became Mrs. Kaden Sterling, the contract bride of a man who looked like he was carved from ambition and ice. Kaden Sterling was every bit the enigma the tabloids made him out to be. Sharp-jawed, unreadable, always dressed in charcoal suits that matched his storm-gray eyes. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded silence, and Lily had learned early that his silence wasn't passive. It was a fortress. Their conversations never went beyond logistics. He had once told her, "This is business. Don't expect more." And so, she didn't. She woke up before him, made sure his coffee was ready by 7 a.m., and vanished before his footsteps reached the kitchen. He liked his mornings undisturbed, and she respected that. She filled her time by transforming the mansion's sterile beauty into something softer, arranging fresh blooms in crystal vases, placing warm-toned rugs on cold floors, lighting vanilla candles when the sun began to fade. But these gentle rebellions went unnoticed. Or so she believed. That morning, winter fog curled against the high windows as Lily placed a vase of white lilies on the foyer table. The chill in the marble rose through her slippers, but she ignored it, her attention on adjusting one stubborn stem that refused to sit upright. It was a small thing, insignificant even, but it mattered to her, in the way small acts of control matter when one has so little of it. Just as she turned to retrieve a fallen petal, a voice, low, smooth, startling, cut through the stillness like a blade. "Lily, I need you at a gala tomorrow night. Business demands it. Wear something elegant and keep quiet." She froze, her hand tightening around the petal. Slowly, she turned to face him. Kaden stood by the archway in a black turtleneck and slate-gray slacks, his coat draped over one arm, the other hand checking his watch as if the words he had just spoken were no more significant than a weather report. It was the first time in 3 years he had asked her to accompany him in public. Not for a holiday, not for a photo, not for a charitable function bearing his name. Nothing. And now, with barely a glance, he summoned her like one might summon a chauffeur or an assistant. Lily met his eyes, and for the briefest second, something flickered there. Not warmth, not apology, something else, something indecipherable. She nodded without speaking, her voice lodged somewhere between surprise and resignation. As he turned away, she caught her reflection in the polished glass of the window, dressed in a soft cream cardigan, hair pulled back, eyes tired. And for the first time in a while, she didn't look away. She ascended the spiral staircase to her wing of the house, past the double doors of his bedroom that had never opened for her. In her walk-in closet, dust clung to the sleeves of gowns never worn. She reached for one wrapped in silk, deep sapphire, with delicate beadwork that caught the light like stars. She had bought it before the wedding, full of foolish hope that one day he'd see her. Not just the woman who saved his family's reputation, but the woman who wanted to be seen, loved, wanted. Her fingers traced the neckline. It still fit. She pressed the fabric to her chest and closed her eyes, whispering, "Just one night. Let me feel real." The next day unfolded like any other. Kaden didn't speak during breakfast. He skimmed financial news while she stirred cream into his coffee. He left at exactly 7:40, offering a tight nod in her direction before stepping into the waiting Bentley. She spent the day preparing in silence. At 6:30 p.m. the car returned. She descended the stairs in the sapphire gown, the hem brushing the marble with every step. He stood by the door, adjusting his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. His eyes lifted, pausing on her, just for a beat. And something in his posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. "You look fine," he said. And she took the compliment, like a drop of water in a desert. In the car, he explained the evening's expectations without turning to look at her. "Smile when spoken to. Don't drink too much. Don't draw attention. Investors want to see stability, not scandal." His voice was flat, rehearsed. She bit her tongue, nodding as she looked out the window. The city lights blurred like stars caught in motion. She wanted to ask why now? Why her? Why, after 3 years of polite avoidance, he suddenly needed her by his side? But she knew better. Kaden didn't offer reasons. He offered terms. As they arrived at the gala, camera flashes flickered like fireflies. He stepped out first, buttoning his coat, then offered his hand. She placed hers in his, careful to keep her grip light. The crowd's eyes turned to them as they entered. A striking couple of contradictions. She, delicate and glowing. He, brooding and powerful. But beneath the flawless facade, her heart raced with confusion and fear. Was this a turning point, or just another mask? Inside, chandeliers dripped with crystal, and laughter floated like perfume in the air. Kaden leaned into business mode, shaking hands, nodding, making promises with charm so effortless it made her ache. Lily stayed beside him like instructed, smiling politely, her presence ignored by everyone but the occasional envious woman who noted her dress. She became a statue, a mannequin draped in blue. When her hand began to tremble from holding her glass too tightly, she quietly drifted to a corner, craving a breath of herself. As she watched him from afar, Lily whispered to no one, "If I have to pretend, I might as well pretend I belong." And so she smiled, straightened her shoulders, and stepped back into the crowd, into the performance of a lifetime. The golden light of the ballroom danced across marble floors and gilded ceilings, casting everyone in a glow of timeless luxury. Lily Harper stood still at the edge of it all, a crystal flute of champagne cradled in her hand as conversations swirled around her like perfume. Light, expensive, and just out of reach. Kaden had left her side almost the moment they walked in, disappearing into a circle of board members and potential investors with the ease of a man used to commanding attention. His voice, low, sure, practiced, echoed now and then across the crowd, but never toward her. She was invisible again, no matter how the sapphire gown hugged her figure or how many glances passed her way. Her fingers tightened slightly on the stem of the glass as she tracked him across the room, watching how he laughed without restraint, how he leaned in when speaking to others with an intimacy she had never known. She shouldn't have cared. After all, this wasn't love, It was strategy. Yet something about the way he hadn't looked back, not once, chipped away at her resolve. For the first time in years, she felt something break through the numbness. It wasn't heartbreak. It was humiliation. The kind that sneaks into your spine and straightens it, that says you deserve more, even if your mind says you don't. The champagne, dry and laced with citrus, warmed her throat as she sipped again, this time with less caution. One glass turned into two, then three, as the room began to soften and her smile came easier, her laugh rising without force. She didn't realize when he first approached, only that a voice, smooth and unfamiliar, broke the isolation like sunlight through frost. "You look too lovely to be standing here alone. I'm Vincent." His smile was unapologetically charming, and his posture told her he didn't care who was watching. Lily blinked, her lips parting before instinct took over. She almost said nothing. Then, with a surprising boldness, she said, "Lily. Just Lily." Vincent raised his glass in an elegant toast. "To just Lily, then." His eyes twinkled with mischief and something else, genuine interest. Not the calculated glances of men measuring social advantage, but curiosity, warm and direct. He asked where she was from, what brought her here, and how she endured events where no one noticed the most captivating person in the room. His words wrapped around her like silk, coaxing out laughter she hadn't heard from herself in years. It wasn't flirting, not at first. It was relief, finally being seen, being spoken to like a person and not a placeholder. But across the ballroom, Kaden's gaze found her. It wasn't immediate, but when it happened, the shift in his demeanor was electric. His lips paused mid-sentence, the muscles in his jaw tightened, and his gray eyes narrowed like a storm rolling in. He handed off his drink to someone without looking and made his way toward her with a controlled, calculated stride. Lily didn't see him until Vincent leaned slightly closer to refill her glass and said something that made her laugh, just as Kaden's hand closed around her wrist. His grip wasn't harsh, but it was firm, possessive, unmistakable. "We're leaving, now." His voice was low, tight with a fury barely caged behind clenched teeth. Vincent stepped back immediately, his brows lifting in surprise, and Lily's smile fell as her heart lurched. She glanced at Kaden, searching his face for a trace of the man who had kissed her on the bridge of memory. But all she saw now was cold rage. "You're making a scene," she whispered through clenched teeth, but he didn't answer. He simply guided her toward the exit, his hand never leaving her wrist. The ride home was a study in silence, sharpened by tension. The car's interior, usually so quiet, now crackled with restrained emotion. Kaden sat stiffly beside her, one hand on the wheel, the other flexing open and closed on his thigh. City lights streaked across the windshield like veins of gold, and Lily, emboldened by champagne and rising fury, finally broke the quiet. "You don't get to act jealous, Kaden. You don't get to care now." Her voice didn't tremble. It struck like glass against stone. He didn't look at her as he said, "You're my wife. Flirting in public reflects on me." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Wife? You've never treated me like one. You needed a partner for your reputation. I filled that role. But don't pretend this is about love or loyalty." Kaden swerved suddenly, exiting the freeway and turning onto a side road that climbed toward the river. The city fell away behind them, replaced by the hush of trees and the reflection of stars on water. The car rolled to a stop on a bridge overlooking the lake, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The air was thick with the kind of silence that doesn't ask for space. It demands resolution. He turned toward her, his eyes unreadable but burning. "You're driving me mad," he said, his voice rough, stripped of polish. "You move through our house like a ghost, decorating it with beauty and silence. And then tonight, you laugh with another man like it cost you nothing. Do you think I don't see it? Do you think I don't feel it every damn day?" Lily's heart pounded, caught between shock and something she couldn't name. "I'm not yours to control, Kaden. I'm not your project or your prize. You never asked me how I felt about anything." He leaned closer, the shadows cutting across his face, and his next words came not as a threat, but as a confession. "I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answer." Before she could respond, his mouth found hers, not with hesitation, but with fire. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, all the things they had both buried beneath cold civility. The kiss tasted of frustration, of longing, of 3 years wasted, and 1 moment too raw to fake. Lily responded without thinking, her hands clutching his jacket, pulling him closer as her breath hitched and her walls cracked. For a few seconds, time vanished. There was no mansion, no contract, no distance, just lips, heat, and the truth finally spoken without words. But then her head spun. The champagne, the adrenaline, the weight of emotion, all of it crashed at once. Her strength buckled, and the world blurred. Kaden caught her before she slumped, his arms suddenly tender, protective, scared. "Lily," he whispered, gently brushing hair from her face as he scooped her into his arms. Her head rested on his chest, and though her eyes were closed, she whispered something he didn't quite hear. He drove her home in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other brushing her knuckles in quiet apology. When they arrived, he carried her upstairs, past the closed doors and forgotten pride, and laid her gently on her bed. He pulled the blanket to her shoulders and stood watching her, his face tight with emotion. This wasn't just guilt. This was a man who realized he had finally touched something real and might not be ready for what it meant. The Sterling mansion stood in a hush of midnight stillness, its marble corridors bathed in soft silver from the moonlight seeping through tall windows. Upstairs, the sapphire gown lay crumpled across the chaise lounge, forgotten, while Lily Harper slept beneath a down comforter that swallowed her petite frame. Her breathing was soft and even, her lashes fluttering against flushed cheeks, and the trace of a dream curled at the corner of her lips. Across the room, Kaden Sterling sat on the velvet armchair, his elbows braced on his knees, hands clasped tight. He hadn't moved since placing her in bed. Something inside him, something long ignored, refused to let him leave. He had kissed her on that bridge like a man starved of air. Like everything he had locked away for 3 years had burst to the surface at once. And now, watching her sleep, he realized how close he had come to losing the one thing that had quietly tethered him to anything real. She was more than just his wife in title. She was the only person who had ever looked at this house and tried to make it feel like home. The candles, the flowers, the light touches of softness she added to every cold surface. They weren't attempts at decoration. They were efforts to survive. Kaden leaned back, his head hitting the wall with a dull thud as he exhaled. "You fool," he muttered to himself, though the words tasted heavier than mere frustration. He had built empires, managed billion-dollar mergers, and yet here, in his own home, he had failed at the most basic human endeavor: to see, to cherish, to love. His eyes drifted back to Lily, and something tightened in his chest. She had never demanded anything from him. She had never raised her voice, never crossed boundaries, never even asked for affection. And in return, he had given her silence, until now. Morning tiptoed into the room with a golden haze, and as light spilled across the floor, Lily stirred. Her eyes blinked open, adjusting slowly, her body registering the warmth of the blanket tucked around her. Then she saw him, still dressed in the tuxedo from the night before, shadows under his eyes, watching her with a stillness that made her breath catch. "You stayed?" she asked softly, unsure if she was dreaming. Kaden didn't move. I wasn't sure you'd want me to, he replied, his voice raspier than usual. She sat up, her mind sorting through fragments of the night, the gala, the bridge, the kiss. Heat rushed to her cheeks, and though her heart fluttered, she fought to keep her voice steady. About last night. I was a little drunk. Maybe I imagined it. His gaze didn't falter. You didn't imagine anything. Silence stretched between them like a taut string. Lily swallowed, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "Then why did you kiss me, Kaden? Why now?" He stood and moved toward the window, the morning light casting his profile in sharp contrast. "Because I couldn't pretend anymore. I saw you with that man, and it hit me. How easily someone else could see what I ignored for so long." "You're not invisible, Lily. You never were. I just made you feel that way." She rose, pulling the robe around her, her bare feet silent against the floor. "I didn't need grand gestures, Kaden. I just needed to matter. Not as a trophy, not as a favor to your parents, as a person, as your partner." He turned then, walking to her slowly, cautiously, like a man afraid to break something fragile. "I see that now," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "And I'm sorry it took this long. I've spent years building walls because I thought vulnerability was weakness. But last night, when I thought you might walk away, I realized the only thing I was afraid of losing was you." Her eyes shimmered but no tears fell. She had cried enough in this house, behind closed doors. Now, her strength came in the form of silence, of standing her ground. "Words are easy, Kaden," she said, her voice steady. "What are you going to do about them?" He didn't hesitate. "Start over, tonight. Let me take you somewhere. No expectations, no press, no suits. Just you and me." Lily blinked, unsure whether to trust him, but something in his expression, vulnerable, unguarded, softened her. She nodded slowly. "One night. That's all I promise." By evening, the city lights glittered behind them as Kaden drove along a quiet road, flanked by trees, the air crisp and clear. He had shed the weight of business for a navy sweater and jeans, and even his cologne seemed softer, more human. Lily, in a flowing ivory dress and wind-tousled hair, stared out the window, unsure of what to feel. When the car pulled onto a secluded overlook near the lake, she finally spoke. "You used to come here?" Kaden nodded. "When my parents fought. When the pressure got too loud. This place, it was quiet, honest." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's the right place to start." They stepped out, the night wrapping around them like a velvet curtain. Above, stars pricked the sky, and the lake below reflected their glimmer, unmoving and endless. Kaden reached for her hand, tentative, seeking permission more than comfort, and Lily let him take it. They stood in silence, the wind carrying the scent of pine and still water, until he turned to her fully. "May I kiss you again?" he asked, the question unraveling her defenses in an instant. She looked up, her lips trembling between restraint and longing. "Only if it means something this time," she whispered. "Only if you mean it." His hands cupped her cheeks, his touch reverent. And this time, when his lips met hers, it wasn't fire, it was warmth, steady and slow, a kiss that asked to stay. It was the kind of kiss that said, "I see you." That said, "I want to stay." That said, "I'm ready." When they parted, foreheads touching, Lily whispered into the quiet, "This doesn't fix everything." Kaden nodded, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "No, but it's the first thing I've ever truly wanted to fix." And under the starlight, with the lake as their witness, two broken hearts began to stitch themselves together. One kiss, one breath, one truth at a time. The days that followed their kiss under starlight passed with a tenderness neither of them fully understood, as if the mansion itself exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. There were no grand declarations, no immediate changes in routine, Yet something in the air shifted, subtle, but undeniable. Kaden no longer rushed out the door with a clipped goodbye. Instead, he lingered at the breakfast table, sipping coffee in silence as Lily arranged flowers nearby. They didn't speak much. Not yet, but the distance between them began to close. Not with words, but with presence. Lily felt it in the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking, in the softened edges of his voice, in the way he no longer recoiled from moments of quiet vulnerability. And though a small part of her resisted, guarding the wounds of the past, she couldn't ignore the flicker of hope lighting within her. For the first time since their wedding, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this marriage could become something real. That belief shattered one Wednesday morning with a single phone call that split her world in two. She had been polishing the curved oak banister on the grand staircase, humming to herself when her phone rang. The screen flashed with a name she barely recognized, Mr. Alcott, Kaden's assistant. She answered, expecting something mundane. Instead, the tremble in his voice turned her blood to ice. Mrs. Sterling. There's been an accident. Mr. Sterling's car. There was a collision on the expressway. He's alive, but it's serious. He's at St. James Hospital. The words hit her like a tidal wave, dragging her down before she could even breathe. She didn't remember grabbing her coat or keys. She didn't remember telling the driver where to go. All she knew was the sound of her heartbeat, deafening in her ears, and the image of Kaden, bloodied, broken, or worse, flickering like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. She burst into the emergency room with panic etched into every step, eyes scanning for any trace of him. The nurse behind the desk recognized her immediately and led her down a sterile hallway, where everything smelled like antiseptic and fear. When the door opened to Kaden's room, Lily froze. He lay on the hospital bed, pale against the white sheets, a bandage wrapped around his forehead, and a monitor beeping steadily beside him. One arm was in a sling, the other resting loosely by his side. She rushed to him, her knees buckling as she reached the edge of the bed. Her fingers found his hand, and her voice trembled with urgency and sorrow. "Don't you dare leave me, Kaden! Don't you dare!" Tears spilled down her cheeks without restraint, soaking into the sheets as she leaned forward, her forehead resting gently on his chest. "I love you. I love you, you stubborn, guarded man. I can't lose you now. Not when I finally found you." She didn't realize he was awake until she felt a soft tug at her fingers. She pulled back in shock to find his gray eyes open, glazed with pain, but unmistakably focused on her. He tried to smile, though it twisted with discomfort. "Did I hear that right?" he murmured, voice hoarse. "You love me." Flustered and exposed, Lily tried to pull her hand away, but he held on weakly. You weren't supposed to hear that," he chuckled, an actual laugh, despite the tension in the room. "Perfect timing as always." She stared at him, overwhelmed by relief and frustration. "You idiot," she whispered, brushing the hair from his forehead. "You scared me." His gaze softened, and he squeezed her hand gently. "I didn't mean to. A truck ran the light. I didn't even see it coming." Her lip quivered, but she composed herself. "You don't get to die, Kaden Sterling. Not before you prove you mean what you said on that bridge." His eyes didn't waver. "I meant every word." Later, as the nurse checked his vitals and adjusted the IV, Lily noticed something absurdly endearing. She had rushed out of the house in mismatched slippers, one pink, one navy. Kaden caught her looking down and followed her gaze, then smiled. A real one this time. "That's the woman I love," he said. Elegant chaos. She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help laughing. The moment was ridiculous and raw, and absolutely theirs. For the first time, the hospital room didn't feel like a place of fear. It felt like a place where something real had begun to grow. When visiting hours ended, Lily stood to leave, hesitating in the doorway. Kaden's voice stopped her. "Don't go far." She turned back, her smile soft. "I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, she became a fixture at his bedside, bringing homemade soup in thermoses, fluffing his pillows and scolding him gently when he tried to check work emails. Their conversations deepened, stretching beyond polite exchanges and into the honest territory of memory, regret, and longing. He told her about his childhood, the weight of expectations, the loneliness of a life lived behind polished facades. She told him how terrified she had been when she first entered the mansion, how she had cried in the bathroom on their wedding night because he hadn't said a word to her. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly on the hospital window, Kaden reached for her hand and held it firmly. "I don't want to return to the way things were. I want us to build something better." Lily looked down at their intertwined fingers and whispered, "Then we start over. Not with promises, but with actions." When he was discharged, he refused a nurse escort and insisted Lily be the one to help him walk. As they left the hospital together, their steps were slow but steady. One arm in a sling, one heart finally open. The ride home was quiet but not empty. Lily leaned her head against the window, watching raindrops slide across the glass, while Kaden stole glances at her with quiet awe. He knew then that the accident hadn't just shaken his body. It had cracked open something deeper, something he had kept hidden even from himself. He had nearly lost her without ever truly having her. But now, as the Sterling mansion came into view, warm lights glowing in the mist, he finally understood. This time, he wasn't walking into a house. He was walking into a second chance. The Sterling mansion, once cold and echoing, had grown warmer in subtle ways, not just from the gentle hum of classical music in the background or the fresh peonies Lily arranged every morning, but from the laughter that now lived in its halls. Since Kaden's return from the hospital, everything had changed. Not in grand, cinematic flourishes, but in small, meaningful shifts that stitched together the fragile fabric of something new. He worked less, smiled more, and, to Lily's astonishment, had started eating breakfast with her every morning without checking his phone once. Kaden Sterling, once the ghost of a man behind steel eyes and curated indifference, had become startlingly human. He now asked about her day, remembered how she liked her tea, and touched her as if she might vanish. A soft hand on her lower back in passing, a gentle brush of fingers along her wrist, a kiss pressed to her forehead before bed. Each gesture felt like a whispered apology for every year he had ignored her existence. One Friday afternoon, the late spring sun filtered through the windows in slanted beams as Lily stood by the doorway, tying her sandals. She wore a simple linen dress, pale yellow with buttons down the front, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders. Kaden entered, leaning on his cane less and less each day, and raised an amused brow. "Are we escaping again?" he asked. Lily turned with a smile. "I thought we could. You owe me an afternoon that doesn't involve conference calls or nurses hovering over you." He chuckled, retrieving the car keys from the tray. "Then lead the way, Mrs. Sterling. I'm yours." They drove without destination, the city falling away behind them, replaced by stretches of green hills and quiet roads that curled like ribbon through the countryside. It felt like driving toward the edge of the world, or the beginning of a better one. Eventually, Lily pointed to a weathered sign by a winding trail. "There, Riverside Park." Kaden turned in without question, trusting her completely, and they followed the dirt path until it opened into a secluded clearing where the river glistened under the sun. A picnic basket waited in the trunk, prepared by Lily earlier that morning. She spread out a navy checkered blanket under the shade of an old oak, her movements graceful and unhurried. Kaden sat beside her, folding his long legs awkwardly as he adjusted his weight. "Tell me this doesn't involve another health smoothie," he teased. She pulled out chocolate croissants, berries, and sparkling lemonade with a playful smile. "You almost died. You deserve carbs." They ate, laughed, and leaned back to watch the clouds drift lazily overhead. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, Lily rolled onto her side to face him. "You know, I used to come to places like this in my head, when the mansion felt like a prison. I'd imagine rivers and breezes and quiet moments just like this one." Kaden turned to her slowly, guilt flickering in his eyes. "And I never noticed. I was too consumed by the world outside those walls to see you right in front of me." She reached for his hand, squeezing it. "You see me now. That's what matters." As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting golden ripples across the river, Lily stood and dusted off her dress. "Come on," she said, grinning. "I want to show you something." Kaden followed her carefully, his steps still guarded but steady. They walked down to the edge of the water, where stones peeked above the current like scattered secrets. She bent and picked up one, smooth and flat. "Skimming stones?" he guessed. She nodded. "My dad used to take me to the river when I was little. He taught me how. Said if you could make a stone dance, it meant you had a wish worth chasing." She tossed it. The stone leapt twice before vanishing beneath the surface. "Not bad," he said, "but watch this." He mimicked her motion, surprisingly graceful for a man of his stature, and sent the stone, skipping 4 perfect times. She gasped. "Okay, fine, you win." He leaned in, voice low. "Then I wish—" She waited, breath caught in her throat. "I wish you'd wear that ridiculous bunny ear headband again. The one from the photo booth." Lily laughed, the sound carrying across the river like music. "You're impossible." "But you love me," he said, his smile boyish. "I do," she whispered, her voice catching. "So much it scares me." They sat again on the blanket as twilight crept in. Fireflies began to flicker in the tall grass, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves above. Lily leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Kaden," she asked. "Yes?" "Do you think we were always meant to get here? Even with the way we started?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the river. "I think the most beautiful things don't begin perfectly. They survive being broken, and they choose to grow anyway." She tilted her head up, eyes glistening in the fading light. "So what are we now?" He looked down at her, then pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. "We're the version of us that finally chose love." Time slipped by unnoticed, the stars blinking into the darkening sky, the river whispering its eternal lullaby. As the evening deepened, Lily wrapped a blanket around both of them, and Kaden rested his chin atop her head. "I want this forever," he murmured. "Not the mansion, not the empire, this. You and me by a river laughing about bunny ears and carbs." She smiled against his chest. "Then promise me, no matter what comes next, we fight for this. For us." He didn't hesitate. "Forever." The moment lingered like the hush after a symphony's final note, rich with emotion and the weight of everything they had endured. They stayed by the river until the moon rose high and silver, casting their shadows long across the grass. When they finally packed up and walked back to the car, hand in hand, they didn't need to speak. Their silence no longer a wall, but a promise, a vow. That night, the mansion welcomed them not as strangers, but as lovers. The light seemed warmer, the air less still, and in the foyer, the vase of fresh lilies had bloomed fully at last. And that's the journey of Lily and Kaden, a love that began in silence, but found its voice in the most unexpected places. What part of their story touched you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Your support means the world and helps us bring more heartfelt tales to life. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, take care, stay kind, and never stop believing in second chances.